get started here. It's 4:30. It's the last session of the day. Unfortunately, we forgot the cooler of beer in the truck, so hang tight. We'll get you out of here in about half an hour. Go start happy hour. So, my name's Kyle Johnson. I'm a project manager for Dunn Construction. I had the privilege of working on a construction project here a few years ago for Minnehaha County Jail down in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. We're going to talk about something new and unique that we tried on that project that led to great successes both during construction and afterwards. So with me here I have Sarah Paul. She's with Dunn Construction. She's our virtual design and construction manager that worked on this project. Next to her is Jeff Gromer. During the project, he was the warden at the jail. He's now Chief Deputy of Minnehaha County. And next to him is Lieutenant Mike McGovern. He's a lieutenant at the jail now. So a little bit of background on the project. There was a need for additional housing and whatnot intake at the Minnehaha County Jail. Jeff will get into that a little bit more, but first step in that was finding a project team that is able to actually, so Minnehaha County and Tegra Group is the owner's rep. They solicited proposals for construction manager. Dunn, along with a partner, Henry Carlson Construction, ended up winning the proposal. Dunn, we're headquartered right here in Kansas City. Actually driving around, you may have seen some of our tower cranes and projects that we've recently completed. If you're staying at the Lowe's Hotel, we finished that a couple years ago. And right across the street from there is some more condos being built that we're a part of. But we do a lot of justice centers across America. We've done over 100 different justice facilities, about $1.5 billion of construction over the last 15 years alone. We have like 25 offices nationwide, so wherever you guys are from, we're nearby. I can almost guarantee you that. But on this project, we partnered with Henry Carlson Construction. They're a very similar construction firm as us, except more local to the Sioux Falls region. So they had a very local tie to the area. We had the expertise in justice facilities. Partnership really made sense from that standpoint. Kind of similar to that on the design team, JLG Architects was local to Sioux Falls, and BWBR is a huge justice center designer nationwide. So that partnership really made sense, and combining all of our expertise and whatnot on this project really led to a lot of success. So I'll get into a little bit more background on the project now. Basically, we built a $45 million addition to the existing jail. It consisted of a vertical expansion, which in this photo it would be this top level. We added a story on top of the existing facility, and then we added a 4-story facility right next to the existing building and tied them all in. They're all now one facility. But it's about $45 million. We started construction in the fall of 2018. It's about a 20-month build time, so we got done kind of actually as the pandemic was starting in 2020. Yeah, so the project is primarily a precast structure with CMU block cells. It's located right downtown Sioux Falls, very urban site. Virtually no laydown area. We had to really work with our scheduling department and do just-in-time deliveries for all the precasts and whatnot. And then safety in an urban site is always a huge challenge that we were able to overcome. So That's very brief background on the project. You know, if you have any questions, we can certainly go into more detail later. But right now, I'll turn it over to Jeff and explain kind of the need for the project and what led to that. So.
Sure. Jeff Roman, Chief Deputy with the Sheriff's Office in Minnehaha County. Just a little about Sioux Falls. As you can see from the map, we're in the southeast part of South Dakota. Sioux Falls is the largest city in the state. Minnehaha County is the most populous county in the state. And the community is really, really growing. In 2000, the MSA data is about 185,000 people. By 2022, we're looking at 260,000 people. You can see the pictures of the original jail. When we did the expansion, we were at about 400 beds. And it was about 2011, 2012, we were seeing that our facility was, one, getting too full, and two, the intake and release areas, the processes we were using for that were just really getting crowded, and it wasn't sufficient for the volume we were dealing with. So as we started our whole master planning process, it was, to some of us, it was painfully obvious we wanted to build right on site. We didn't want to end up with a greenfield site away from the courthouse and the county campus. And through the studies, it turned out that was going to be far more economical and way better for operational standpoints of the facility. So we were able to decide on doing the addition on site. As the slide here indicates, we went from about 5,000 bookings to about 20,000 bookings in that 20-year span. So the community is really growing, our pace was really growing, and we clearly, with that increase in the number of bookings, we knew our housing needs were becoming very constrained. But we knew we were going to add housing, but that intake and release process really needed a revamp of how we were doing things. So when we set up the project, we really wanted to phase it. Our facility started off at 400 beds. Clearly we knew we had a housing situation, and that's why we were able to, through the design work, we added 128 dormitory beds on top of the existing jail, which allowed us to open that early and really take off some of that housing pressure while they did the rest of the work. It was really beneficial to get that done so we could free up some space.
Again, that was this top part here.
The second phase of the project was then that addition with that new intake and release area. And for the staff and the processes through the building, that was really a monumental shift for a lot of people in how we did those operations. It just changed a lot. Our old intake area was kind of the hub of the jail. Everybody that was getting booked into the jail came there. Everybody that was getting released, everybody that was going to court all went to this intake area, which was fine when you're dealing with 5,000, 6,000 a year. When you throw that up to 20,000, it just wasn't sufficient to handle it. So we really needed to change that path and that flow through the facility. And that was really the second phase of the project, getting that piece up and running. And then we did add some additional housing beds, a courtroom in that part of the jail. The third phase was really getting the upper level on the addition for housing staff. We're fortunate at this point, as you look at the picture of it, the middle 2 floors of that jail are currently vacant. We don't have them, the jail beds are there, we don't have them staffed, we don't have them occupied, we don't even really have equipment in them like computers and whatnot. So we have that that we can occupy as we continue to grow further. And then the last phase of the project would really be we have the ability to add 2 floors onto the addition, which I'm very optimistic we won't see that in the near future. But it's nice to have that ability. When we built the original building, and we built the ability to expand vertically on that really paid off in the long run because we were able to get those beds added sooner. It just seems typical of jail construction. People don't really start jails until you're full. And that allowed us to get that put on fairly quickly in the process and move ahead with them.
But so you mentioned the courtroom that's in the new building. So I bring in Lieutenant McGovern here and talk a little bit about the advantage to that and having it right on site there.
Early on in the planning process, jail foreman wasn't on our radar, but as Jeff mentioned, one of the things we did early on was we visited about half a dozen jail facilities we visited at a jail courtroom. We kind of like what they had at their building, so we stole some of their ideas and mixed them with ours, and we came up with what's now our jail courtroom, and that's the court side of it you see up there, and then we have an inmate side on the other side of the glass. In that space, we have everything that we have in our normal courthouse. We have a judge, state's attorney, defense attorney, clerk of courts, bailiff. They come over to the jail every single day and they conduct initial arraignments over at the courthouse. We still have our courthouse on our campus, and that which is connected to our jail, so we still do other hearings over there. But now the most any inmates are transported would take for one court hearing is likely less than 5. Whereas before having this space on a busy Monday, our transporters would go to 6 floors of the jail, hook up 90 to 100 inmates in restraints, escort them all the way over to the courthouse. Now having our jail courtroom in conjunction with our transitional housing area, it's a lot less staff intensive for our transport division, because the majority of the people going to court in this space is coming from our transitional housing blocks, which is 50 feet down the hallway from this courtroom. Rather than all of our transporters going to 6 floors of the jail, they're grabbing all these individuals from transitional housing, bringing them 50 feet down the hallway to court, 50 feet back down when they're done with court. So what it used to take 5 to 6 officers to accomplish report, and now it takes 2 to 3. So we freed up the availability of our transport division that would be used elsewhere inside our facility. We do have all the equipment in this space to do virtual hearings if the need ever arises, but as it is right now, Monday through Friday, we're busy from the morning till the end of the day with in-person hearings. We're doing our circuit court arraignments in the morning, and our MAG initial arraignments all afternoon in this area. Every hearing that takes place in here, it's a public hearing, where we don't let family and friends inside the jail. So what we do, everything that takes place in this space is broadcasted over the internet. So any device that you have access to the internet, you can see what's going on in this room. People don't have such a device or they can't afford the internet. We do provide a viewing space inside our courtroom where friends and family of our in custody individuals going to court can go to our courthouse, see what's taking place in this courtroom just on the TV screen. One of the obstacles that we had early on was getting our judges on board. Much like your judges, I'm sure our judges weren't too thrilled about the idea of having to leave their comfy courthouse and come over to the jail to conduct hearings. One way we won them over was just including them in the process early on. We listened to them when it came to designing this phase, and one of their concerns was obviously their safety with entering and exiting the jail and being around inmates. So we took that into consideration with the design portion of this, as well as when we developed our policies as far as how we're going to conduct hearings in this space. So some of the advantages they've seen since we've had it is court's quicker. We've trimmed down the wait time with that, with what I explained earlier about transporting. So they're not having to wait for our officers to get inmates into this space. They don't have the public they're dealing with. And same with our staff, we're not dealing with the public with significant others, boyfriend, girlfriends, or mom and dad being in the viewing room and being a distraction to their inmates. So they see the benefits for us, and they also see it for them. Those same judges that we had to convince, a lot of them actually prefer coming over and doing in-custody court in the jail now versus doing the on-custody courts in the courthouse. So it's a good space we have.
Alright, so yeah, that's a lot of the why and a little bit of background on the project. So one of the unique tools that we use, I'll let Sarah talk about, but integrating the design with the construction using building information management and virtual reality to do that. So Sarah can tell you exactly how we did that and what kind of results it led to.
So after these guys and the owner and all the users groups kind of have an idea of what it looks like, they kind of know how they want the spaces to function. They have a few rooms kind of picked out. The design team takes and puts together the construction documents. Now, as they're doing this, they're engineering what size ducts do we need, what diameter pipes do we need, and they're giving us general routing. We kind of think this is going to go here and the pipe's going to go over here, give or take. And that's about as far as they go with it. And they hand it over to us and say, all right, contractors, how do you guys want to build it? Where exactly do you want to put things? And so we get together and we take the complex systems, the ductwork, the conduit, fire protection, all that good stuff, and model it in 3D. There just gets to be a lot of different things that you're trying to fit in a tight space. This building was precast, so they were also included in this separate, so this is kind of looking down, if we peel back the roof. So like above the ceilings in any given space, you probably don't think about, or maybe you do, all this stuff that goes up there. So we go through and we figure out where everybody needs to be, who's going on the top, who's going on the left, who's going over and who's going under. And it really gives us a lot of advantages when it comes time to build. We know what we need, we know the lengths of the things that we're gonna fit in the building, we know what order we're going in. It really helps us from storing a lot of stuff on site that we don't need. Gets our just-in-time deliveries figured out by the piece mark, and it just makes getting things up into the air go a lot more smoothly. So this team was very engaged with this, and you guys might be thinking it's kind of interesting, or you might be thinking, I don't know what you're talking about, which is fine, sometimes I don't know what I'm talking about. But what was great about the engagement with this team is while we were doing this, they're kind of sitting in the background, paying attention a little bit to what we're doing and kind of seeing how we build this thing. At the same time, a separate conversation was going on, and I guess we thought it was a separate conversation about doing a mock-up. So a mock-up is like a sample room of something you're going to have when you're finished. So for this project, we had to do a couple different cell mock-ups, one of a single cell, one of a double cell, and one of an ADA. So we basically just build a single one of these ahead of time, so that when we actually come to build 100 of them, we're not making the same mistake over and over. We built one, we've gone through it, we understand what we need in there and how it looks, and so we can gain some efficiencies with that. So we're thinking about getting our cell mock-up built, and it's really hard to get just one combi toilet. I really only want to see this by separate. So while we were patiently waiting for all of our parts and pieces to come in, somebody had brought up, I said, hey, we have a model. Can we just model one of these to kind of start thinking about what this thing looks like? So we did that. We went into the types of cells we were looking for. We made sure everything that was in there was exactly how it would look when it was finished, that the bed was the exact right size, that the shelves that were in there were the exact ones we were buying, the paint was the right color, beds were the right color, and we put it into a model. So we could spin it around, we could take dimensions, we could kind of get to see a little bit more of what it looked like. So as we're doing this, we're seeing it, we're kind of, we're flying around in the model, we're spinning it around on a screen, and we also have another tool that we, this project has started using, which was a virtual reality headset. So we have this up here, and we will do a little demo on it here in a minute. This is an Oculus Quest 2, so it's the same one you use for gaming. Your kids might use them, you might play with them. And so when we started doing a cell mock-up and thinking about how do we get more engaged with this before we start building it. So basically we're taking, essentially it's a floor plan, which if you're familiar with construction might make some sense. If you're not, it's kind of hard to read. It's kind of hard to feel the space. But really what we're trying to do is picture how do we get from the 2D floor plan to our 3D model into our real space, and how do we make that feel real? So we started using the headset to walk through our cells, and as we're doing that, again, because these guys are engaged, they're thinking about things. They say, well, we have more than just the cells. We have the whole building we can walk through. We can look at it with our staff and start bringing them into what's going to be their new procedures and their new day-to-day workflows. So we started doing just that. We set it up a couple times so we could get a couple different of the shifts walked through, put on the goggles, and it's virtual reality, so it's full immersion. You put it on, and all you can see is like you're in the building. If you take a step, it feels like you're taking a step. You see a shelf on the wall, it feels like a shelf on the wall. You see a desk, it feels like a desk. So it really got some buy-in from the people that were going to be using this space every day. And instead of having just something like this to say, all right guys, here's where the sally port's going to be, here's where pre-flight's going to be, instead of just walking them through like on a map like this, which is helpful, we actually got to have them experience the space in a different way. So
the whole process was completely different for all the staff. So all their processes for intake, release, some of the housing processes were gonna be completely new and completely different. And it'd have been great if I could have had the entire staff in all the design meetings, but that's just not realistic. So what we had was, we had roughly 150 staff at that point in time. So we had a lot of staff, a lot of talking. Some of them knew just a little, some of them knew just enough to be dangerous, and some of them were just talking and didn't really know what they were talking about. So you end up with all these rumors and all these innuendos, and no one was real confident that the holding process was going to work, except for the folks on the design team. Once we were able to get some of our staff members into that headset and to walk through the facility, it immediately changed that around. They went from skeptical to excited to enthusiastic, and were then really, really jazzed up to get into this new building, because they could recognize, as we look at this on the screen doesn't do it justice to when you have the headset on, because when you have the headset on, you really do get a feel for the size of the room. The two biggest things for me was, one, the staff and getting their buy-in and their enthusiasm about the project. The second was real confirmation for me as I put the headset on and walked through some of these. I've seen floor plans, but I don't really have a firm grasp when somebody says, well, that's 30, that room's 30 by 30. Okay, what is, I don't really know what 30 by 30 is, but when I put that headset on, I was able to say, okay, yes, we did size that right. This one's maybe a little too big. Can we take some real estate out of that for something else? And there was a couple of places, I think, that we found we moved a couple doorways here and there as we were going through that process. But for the staff buy-in, it was huge for me, because it really changed a lot of mindset about it. And I don't know that they were negative about it, but it just built that enthusiasm for the finished product.
Jen?
What's your average daily population?
What are we
500.
About 500.
After COVID.
Yeah.
So just like many jails across the country, we kick a bunch of people out when COVID hit. So right now our average daily population is 500.
Direct supervision?
We got direct supervision and indirect supervision in our jail.
We started at 400. I think our total bed capacity now is 579, and then we have the ability to expand that by 148 without doing any additional construction.
Thanks, Jeff. I'll just point a couple things out on the, I guess, photo we're looking at, if you, for lack of a better term, but mentioned at the top level. Do you see my lightsaber?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. The top level there, that's dorm housing. That's built on the existing jail again. And so that was how many folks could live up there? 100.
We have 4 indirect supervision doors up there, 32 apiece, so 128.
And then there was like a workout space, a couple workout spaces kind of in the center there. Looking at this addition here, obviously you walk in the main entrance here, we have visitation in this room. There's some offices here, employee break room. Second level here is kind of the medical area and mechanical space. Kind of right in the center is the housing. Off to the left over here is the sally port. So bring the van in, drop off, or cars, whatever, drop off in the sally port. And kind of in the center area we'll be walking through is your intake and booking. So I'm gonna, hopefully this works. So here we are. Jeff, you can just kind of explain as I'm walking around what we're looking at, where we're at.
We're inside the sally port now. Our old sally port was way too small. So this is clearly bigger, allows for direct traffic through. As Mike mentioned, we were very fortunate during the design phase that we were able to tour some jails. So we were able to do them using, I think it was G.E. Dunn's plane and JLG's plane. So we were able to tour 6 jails in 2 days. And that was hugely beneficial to go through these jails. I think we took something from every jail we saw and implemented it into our design. So if you've ever been in the Johnson County, Kansas intake area, this will look really, really similar. I toured that facility twice and stole every idea I could get my hands on. So as the arresting officer will bring the inmate in through here, Walk into this space here, and again, the video we look at gives us an idea as to what the size is. It really does with the headset on. So here's a property window. This is a new property room. That's one of the spaces where I thought on the floor plan it looked enormous. And compared to our old one, it is. But once you put the headset on, kind of walk through it and realize that where that kind of screening is there in there, that's where like a dry cleaner rack goes, that it was sized appropriately. So I was able to get some confirmation with that. As he turns to his right a little bit, the officers will take their arrestee down to these computers that are along the wall. That's where they start the booking process. If the inmate's uncooperative, these doors to his left are just very Spartan cells for them to spend a few minutes until they can get themselves settled down and then move into the intake area. In that space, we have a body scanner machine to search as they come into the jail. And then to his right is where our holding cells are. We really try to design the intake area to provide them some incentive to behave. You come in, if you don't want to behave, you can go right into one of those chutes. If you notice those chutes, there's no bunk, there's no toilet, there's no sink, there's no nothing. It's get your act together and move through the process. And then if they're cooperative, there's not even really any reason for them to go into a holding cell. They'll stay out in that lobby area, calling for bond, getting the booking process done. So those doors there is medical, they'll get medical screened in that area before they move into housing, and then the officer's desk is up there behind that half wall. But so everything kind of flows that way through the facility. Once somebody is processed, medically screened, cooperative, and sober enough to function, then they move right across the hall into this transitional housing area that Mike referenced. These are 60 beds designed for very short-term stay, like 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 days. Basically until somebody, from the time they get arrested, until they see the judge. So they go to that initial arraignment, they get their bond, or get PR'd, or get told they're gonna stay. At that point in time, then we'll move them out of this area and get them into a more permanent housing situation. But designed just like the rest of the jail, just wouldn't consider this general population. We just don't feel the need for these guys that are coming in on Friday that we know are gonna get out of jail on a Monday. There's no reason for us to go through the labor and all the work to get them processed and ready for the general population. The courtroom's just down the hallway here. As Mike mentioned, it's so much easier to take these 60 guys the 50 feet down the hallway to court rather than all the way over to the courthouse. So inmates enter through this area of the courtroom, walk into this space. Obviously now there's benches where they're all sitting through their whole hearing. And then they just turn and face the judge's bench. I think we had a picture of that up earlier, what that bench actually looks like. Completely separates the inmate from the court. That's all detention glass, just like the housing units would be up in the housing areas. And then once they're done with court, right back down the hall to that transitional housing space until they get processed for release or moved up to housing. The release portion, we really wanted to keep intake strictly for intake. So now the officers that are responsible for this transition housing area also process all the releases. And the releases just process straight down that hallway. They go through, there's a couple of rooms there where they'll change out of their jail uniform into their civilian clothes, sign for their property at this window here, and then they go right out the doors right there, right out through there onto the street. It has worked really, really well. Our intake staff prior to this design change was so overwhelmed by the end of the shift because they had so many people coming and going and trying to keep track and make sure they don't release the wrong guy or just miss anything with all that traffic. And this one-way traffic through intake, one-way traffic through release has really been beneficial for us. But with all those changes to that booking process, being able to get the staff into the headset and really kind of walk through it like I just did with you guys was very, very beneficial. They went, like I said, they went from being fairly apprehensive about the changes to, oh, this is great, when are we gonna move in? And it was kind of rewarding for us on the design team to get that enthusiasm out of them because it's like, okay, we've got their buy-in now. And Our staff is great that way. If we can get buy-in from them, it'll work. They make it work as long as they're bought in. And this helped us immensely in getting that buy-in.
Having this team engaged with the kind of the meat and potatoes work we were doing with all of the mechanical and electrical systems, kind of, sparked the idea to be able to do this with the staff, which is not something that we, every project we don't do. We don't always have people on our team that, kind of know what we're doing, know the needs of the staff, and are engaged to be able to help us make these connections between, having a new intake and being able to walk through a new intake virtually. So it was really kind of a fun thing to have on a project where you have somebody that's actively engaged and understands what you're doing and can make both sides of it better.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of engagement, Jeff obviously has a very busy day job being the warden at the time. But we had weekly construction meetings with the designers and the with the architects and the owners. Jeff had multiple people from Minnehaha County with him. So having those weekly meetings and having them really actively engaged really helped the project go very smoothly. And we were able to solve a lot of issues right away versus over emails or phone calls. And so I highly recommend if you're ever building a project, regardless of who it's with, be engaged, be active in decision making, make decisions quickly. It will save a lot of headache and quite frankly, it will save the project a lot of money too. So I guess speaking of that, I mean, how do you feel?
I couldn't imagine building a facility without attending those meetings. When delays or something came up, we didn't have to waste time with them educating me as to why it was, because I'd been at the meetings and I was well aware of why it was. We've been there, and so it takes away a lot of that. The other thing is the questions inevitably come up as far as, hey, this isn't really working like we thought it was going to work when we do it. We were able to make those decisions very quickly in the meeting because everybody had all the same background and we had the discussions throughout the whole thing. I thought it worked very well through the process to be there talking, and then obviously as we worked on a 2-year construction project, we all got to know each other fairly well, and that just makes the communication that much easier. It would have been really hard if I only knew anybody via email. It was way easier having met and sit at the tables and talk. It was really
Question. Chief, what kind of flooring did y'all go with? Did y'all do like LVT or concrete?
in the jail.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's concrete.
Concrete.
That was it was particularly, I think Henry Carlson struggled with that.
I know where you're going with this, but yeah, go ahead.
Henry Carlson in Sioux Falls does a lot of the hospital construction and some of these other larger building constructions, and they could not get over the finishes because they were really, really worried about the finishes. And I'm like, it's concrete and paint. That's it. And they're like, yeah, but we get this door trim. No, I don't want any door trim. I just want concrete and paint. And I know that.
And actually, early on in the design phase, you were like, "Do we even have to paint the walls?"
Yeah, I mean, these guys are inmates. Whatever we put in there, they're gonna wreck it.
Yeah.
There was a couple of the folks from Henry Carlson were like, well, really, we should, we could get this flooring in. It's indestructible. No, it's not indestructible. We're gonna do concrete and paint.
Really, that's about all we have. I don't know if we can open it up for questions or comments, or if anybody wants to really throw on the goggles and walk around. Certainly.
Guys, was there a reason that you went with that in-person courtroom thing? Is that some kind of a rule in your state as
No.
opposed to like a video visit or a video monitor?
Really?
And leave your judges at the courthouse?
So keep in mind, we did a lot of this design work in 2017, 2018. So we were talking about that. I mean, we had seen the setup they had in Johnson County, which is just about, they do that video court thing, but they do it through video, not like we do in person.
Yeah.
Our judges weren't really on board with the video court at that time. I can remember having conversations with, you can't do that. It's not possible. You gotta have the defense there, you got the state there, you can't do this. And we talked, and I said, okay, well, let's build one inside the building. You can get another courtroom that we can count as courthouse courtroom space, and then we'll set it up to be able to do Well, lo and behold, we know more than open, and COVID started, and now all of a sudden video court's a no-brainer. But when we were having those conversations, it was really tough sell to get that. But the in-person court's nice because you don't run into some of the technical issues that you do with video court. We're set up where we can do video court, but the court staff and everybody, now that they're comfortable coming into the jail, that was the other thing that really helped is as we got close to finish, we did a ton of tours with the court staff. I mean, the clerks were like terrified of coming into the jail. And once you do a few tours and they see that route and that process, it really, everybody settled down fairly quickly. It's, as Mike said, way more efficient.
And is this also your campus for like your sheriff and your detectives, or is
Yeah,
that?
we're actually right across the street. So as you're standing looking at that door, just turn around 180 and that's
Yeah,
the law enforcement
The
center.
street comes down this way and then it's like right over.
And then the full courthouse is directly behind this building.
Oh, nice.
So we're still connected to the courthouse. It's just kind of a long serpentine hallway to get there. And to take those, 60 to 80 people that we're gonna do an afternoon arraignment for, that's a gigantic nuisance to move that many people through. So now just moving down the hallways benefit. It's just a huge benefit.
And when we brought the courthouse too, everybody was in restraints. At a minimum, everyone was in handcuffs, likely up to a partner. Anyone with felony charges had shackles on as well. Now that we stay in the security perimeter of the jail, by policy, they don't have to put restraints on. They still have that discretion if they're pulling someone out of disciplinary block or just someone that they know is a known problem child, they can throw restraints on them, but they don't have to hook them all up.
We made some other fairly substantial changes too. Our old jail, our master control pod was outside the secure perimeter of the jail. In this one, we moved it right to the inside. So in that hallway where we were looking down from the courtroom to that transitional housing area to the release area, if you turn around in that view, that's where our master control pod is. So they can see, the person sitting in the control pod can visually see out the window all the way to the exit door where they let the inmates go. So if there's anything that causes them concern going on, they can see it without having to click through cameras and go through there and just put a hard stop on it.
Finally, now that you've had some time to sort of drive this new car, if you will,
Yeah.
what would you have done differently?
There's probably a couple of things here and there in the housing area. The second tier of the housing area, I would have put another staircase and another access in there. We can still make it work, but it's a little bit of a problem for the staff here and there. But that makes it work. Obviously, bigger spaces would have been nice, but you're really limited on that based on your footprint and your dollar figure you can afford. But outside of some really minor stuff, you probably work more with the day-to-day stuff than I do. I don't know if there's anything that's really cropped up.
The one thing I'd like to change, we really couldn't because we had a fiber optic line
Oh yeah.
under the ground. That you notice in our transitional housing, the cells we had stairs going down the cells and stairs going up, which kind of hurt your lines of sights. The first designs we had, the bottom cells were the same as the day area. But we had a fiber optic line going from our courthouse all the way across the street, which was pretty expensive to have that rerouted, and we would have to lose some of the other things that we didn't want to in order to move that, so we changed that.
And if I recall, we sit on a lot of granite.
A lot of granite, yeah.
The removal of that got cost prohibitive, so, yeah.
We're able to use this environment for your cameras.
For the security cameras, this virtual reality portion. We didn't really do that. Their consultant was able to walk through the building, so he didn't really install those until more or less the construction was done. And I think he himself had enough familiarity with it. I think looking at the plans, he was pretty comfortable on where he could get the best coverage with those.
So that's what you're talking about here, you'd like to have another staircase in that area?
Did I go to the right spot?
It would be another access for the staff to get inmates. In our current facility, you can go from the second tier to the elevator and stay in a secure jail space.
Okay.
In this one, so if you leave that second tier, you can't really leave the second. So now if they, let's say they have an inmate that throws a fit on that second floor, and they have to put him in a restraint chair or something, they have to get him down the stairs. In the other facility, and it was, that's one minor little tweak I would make. And really the fact that we're scrambling around trying to find something that we would do different in a $48 million building is pretty
Pretty good deal.
pretty good. If that's the biggest problem I come up with, then I wish we would have done that.
Right on.
I'm okay with that.
I'll make a comment from back here since this is my facility. And as you can see, I let them run this because they were the team that did the work. And it was an incredible partnership with Dunn, with our contractor, local contractor. You would never know if you went to one of those meetings who works for who. It was just one team working for a good cause. It's an open invite to any sheriff or sheriff's office that wants to send people to our facility, because Jeff's right, we stole the best from the best. We really think we did. And in addition to the construction issues that you saw, the way it came together is the other things that we learned about it and that staff became excited about. Our old intake room used to smell like an NFL locker room. Well, we learned from other counties, we get a commercial, so now we have commercial shrink wrap, everything shrink wrap. We've got a way to shrink wrap all their property on cards, and staff, it's amazing how excited they get to start seeing those improvements. The fact that one of those halfway cells in between is I don't want to call it a car wash, but that's what they call it. Has about 9 spigots coming from the floor, the walls, the ceiling, to clean somebody down that really needs to be. And quickly we learned you should establish a good policy and guidelines for who goes in there, how we make sure the temperature is appropriate before we turn 9 faucets on. But it really, for somebody that comes in that's totally, soiled themselves, thrown up on themselves, a way to totally clean them and then get them into appropriate clothing and housing. So, there was so many little things like that that I think they learned from those 6 jail site visits. We did jail site visits before the other jail that you saw that they built onto. We built that in 2003, the 400 beds. And so now we're at 720 bed capacity, about maybe 750. With room for 300, addition of 300 beds, so we cap out at 1,000 at that location. But the partnership between Tegrid, J. Dunn, our staff, it was incredible, and you are welcome anytime to visit and learn not only, the design and where, we're very proud of this facility, but also our policies, and we work with ACA to make sure, and the builders work with ACA to make sure we're appropriate. NCCHC for our medical. It's come together very well, and I'm very proud of the work that this team, my employees, and you as a team, I'm very proud of what you did.
This question is maybe more for the architectural design of it, but this was a pre-COVID design. Have you seen post-COVID more single-cell isolation areas, positive pressure cells, or has that kind of remained unchanged?
Angela, maybe you're better. I haven't worked on another jail after this, now in the healthcare department, but I don't know, Angela, what are you seeing?
Yeah, we're seeing, it really varies. It's county by county, or if it's state versus county. We're seeing a lot of different options out there. There is talk about how do we prepare for another event like that, or even, if somebody has some really terrible virus that we want to isolate. There's conversation about it. I haven't seen it evolved much beyond conversation, or maybe a couple, but you might know more, I'm guessing.
This is your presentation.
But you're an architect,
Yeah.
and you see a lot of this, and you probably have evidence of that.
Yeah, every design's different. What I've enjoyed about this is, just see how you do it where you live.
Yeah.
Because, each state that, Chad's sitting back here working on his projects very different than what we do in Indiana or in Kentucky or in Michigan. And so it's just, it's quite, curious to me just how different states do things just differently.
Yeah. One of the things with our building, we made a conscious effort when we designed it, and it certainly was no foresight. We were seeing it from a classification standpoint, that our original jail had larger housing units. We have 48 bed direct supervision housing units. We got 66 bed direct supervision dormitory units, and then they break down from 18 to 8 beds from there. And what we were noticing as we designed this building and we implemented the design is we had a real need for smaller housing units to put some of these folks that struggle with mental illness and can't function in a bigger unit, or whatever their problem is, they can't get along in a bigger unit. So we purposely designed the new housing with a limited amount of direct supervision, but smaller housing units, so we could break people up by classification. Clearly, no foresight of COVID, but it did turn out to be somewhat beneficial when we started to isolate and quarantine cohorts of people due to COVID. We had some smaller housing units to try to accommodate that.
And same with the transitional housing. Again, no foresight with COVID. We had that large portion of people that get released after their initial arraignment. Upwards of like half our people attending their initial appearance get released without ever getting past transitional housing. So they're not mingling with your general population, not only spreading potentially COVID or any other illnesses that you can think of. So that was very beneficial for that too.
Contraband was one of the big things. When we designed that transitional housing area, we wanted to try to prevent people smuggling things into the general population to the extent possible. We were seeing occasions where somebody would intentionally get themselves arrested so they could smuggle something in. You get yourself arrested on something minor, you smuggle something into your buddy that's in the housing unit. Well, this is, I won't say eliminated, but it's taking great strides to address that, because now they realize right away, well, I'm never getting there. There's no reason for me to get arrested now.
I gotta commit more of a serious crime, which I don't wanna do, to get past my initial arraignment and not get out of jail.
So those things clearly had no idea of COVID, but they did help with COVID. We, like every jail in the country, COVID was a nightmare, so. Anybody wanna try them out?
But seriously, I think the biggest problem I have with these is nobody ever wants to try them on.